Imagine you're at a carnival, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and music, when a clown locks eyes with you from across the crowd. At first, you brush it off as part of the fun, but as you try to leave, you realize it's following you. What begins as an innocent encounter soon turns into a nightmare. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to explore 3 true horror stories of clown encounters gone wrong. Clowns were once beloved for bringing joy and laughter to children's parties and circuses, but over the years, stories of clowns lurking in the shadows with sinister intentions have crept into the realm of horror. Story 1 by Istvan Tomas. I was 14 years old and had never gotten over the memory of that night. I am Istvan Tomas, and my story is about a night I wish I could forget. It was an early autumn in Hungary, and the air was filled with the fragrance of leaves and cold earth. My friends and I had just left this very small carnival that came into our town. Not much, but a few rides and some booths were there. We walked around for a while, laughing and joking. The clowns, which were supposed to entertain everyone, seemed weird. They were too quiet, but I chucked it off as paranoia and passed it along. As the night advanced, I managed to lose my friends. It was unusual since we would often split and meet up later. However, on that particular night, I felt like something was different. People started to disappear, and the lights from the carnival were fading. The music faded away as I headed toward the woods. I had once or twice cut through the trees to get home from here, and nothing was special about this time of day or evening, but I felt that I was being followed. I heard footsteps first. I turned around, expecting to see one of my friends messing with me, but nobody was there. I kept going, trying to ward off the feeling going up my spine. Then I heard it, soft, high-pitched giggles. I froze, my heart beating within my chest. I spun around, and that's when I saw it. There, half hidden in the shadows, stood a clown about 20 feet away, its face painted in bright colors, but the eyes were black, like empty pits, looking straight through me, and its smile was too wide, stretching unnaturally. I thought for a moment it must have been something in the carnival, perhaps a prank, but with the closer look I had, I realized it was not funny at all. "Who are you?" I screamed. The clown just stood there with its goofy grin, and it slowly started following me. I turned and ran, and the branches could rip at my arms as I bucked through the woods. Heavy pounding steps were always there behind me. I didn't look back. All I heard was the laughter. The awful, freezing laughter echoing in the trees, growing louder and closer. I thought I'd lost it when I burst out on the road, but looking back over my shoulder, it was still there. This time it wasn't walking, it was running, its arms outstretched, fingers curled like claws. My house wasn't far, but it felt like miles away. I could feel it closing in, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I finally made it to the front door, yanked it open and slammed it shut behind me, then locked it with shaky hands. I collapsed to the floor and gasped for air. The house was quiet. I thought I was good for a second there. Then the noise started again, the slow pounding at the door. I crawled to the window and pulled aside the curtains to peek out, and my heart sank. On the front porch stood the clown, its hand upraised to knock again. It knew I was there. It knew I was trapped. I took a step back from the window. Mom and Dad weren't home. They won't come back for hours. The knocking continues, steady and patient. I don't know for how long I sat there in the dark corner, listening to that knock. It was as if hours had passed, but then it stopped. The house went back to quiet again, but I was too afraid to go and move and then look out the window. When my parents came home, I said nothing to them. Nobody knew. Who would ever believe it? I couldn't sleep those nights. I avoided the woods. I avoided the carnival. Sometimes when I'm alone, I can still hear this laughter, soft and far away, as if waiting for me. Story 2 by Altan, Batu. When the call came for a job at the circus, I didn't flinch. 22 years old, no steady employment, working for the circus at this point felt just like a lifeline. Oddity just seemed to be just the name of the game in Mongolia, and especially with the winter coming on full force. What started out as a religious ritual during Psalm, meant to ward off evil spirits, went bad. It was my first ever go-through of this kind of function, and a strange buzz was in the air. Faces with flickering light dancing along performing artists lit up in front of the crowd. I was on cleanup duty. Try keeping the grounds immaculate. That's what I did. And that's when I first saw him. He was alone, visibly standing at the edge of the performance space. The clown makeup is smeared. The face paint is white and cracked. The red around his lips is too deep, wet like fresh blood. His grin stretches impossibly wide, but it's his eyes dark and hollow, fixed on me. "Who's that?" I asked one of the other workers, pointing towards the clown. The man next to me turned his head and went pale. "Don't look," he muttered. "That's Batar." I had heard of the name. Years ago, there was this entertainer named Batar, a clown who was famously known for doing frightening acts. Some drunk acquaintances had been too unmanageable on one night, playing an April Fool's trick gone wrong when they sealed him in the trailer and let it burn. He never got out, but this could not be him. Batar was dead. I tried to brush it off. Whispers from the other workers increased and increased, accompanied by the same name, Batar. They spoke about him as if he were still strolling around the circus. And yet, it wasn't till the following evening when I experienced my encounter. I was closing up the animal cages when I heard it, a strange rattling sound, like a scraping shuffle behind me. Turning around, no one was there. Then a gust of wind swept in, followed by a sharp, ear-piercing laugh. And then I saw him. Batar stood no further than 10 feet away. He wasn't like any ordinary clown. His brightly colored costume was singed and blackened, hanging tatters around his body. His skin looked charred, and his face twisted into a creepy smile. But what chilled me the most was the dance. He stiffened, jerked stiff steps, twisted about in ways no man could twist his limbs, and every step his blackened limbs cracked. Hundreds of tiny spiders crept from the sleeves of his clothes and crawled across the ground where he stood. I stood there fixed, my legs refusing to move, as he continued with his strange dance. His laughter was so sharp that it felt like it would break open my head. I didn't want to look at him. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Batar suddenly stopped. His empty eyes locked straight at me. The spiders rushed forward, began to crawl up my feet. The picture of them in mind, their black, spindly legs dancing in perfect harmony, snapped me out of my trance. I stumbled backward and ran as fast as possible for the main tent. But his laughter echoed in my ears, a mocking refrain that rang and would not go. The next morning, I went to the ringmaster and quit without an explanation. I did not care about the money or the shame of leaving so soon after starting. I had seen enough. It has already been months since I ran out of the circus, but Batar's face still haunts my dream every night. I can hear him laughing and see him dancing with those creepy crawling spiders. I wanted to go all the way out of that circus, hoping that I would leave all of it behind. Yet some things you can never run away from. Story 3 by Elizabeth Gortze. There was something about Zum Alten Fritz, a little restaurant just a few blocks from my house in Munich. I would go there with my parents at least thrice a month. It was not just the food that brought me back, it was the clown. His name was Felix, and he belonged to that charm of the restaurant, going around doing funny tricks for adults and children alike while playing the flute. And no matter how many times I've heard him play that flute, he always plays this weird song. For some reason, Felix took a special interest in me. Every time I entered Zum Alten Fritz, Felix would grin a little more expansively, the painted-on smile spreading wide. He gestured to me to come closer to admire his latest trick, or play the same spooky tune on that flute. My parents thought it quaint, but it made me a bit nervous. It was Friday evening, and my family was going for dinner at the restaurant. As we got nearer, I could see a crowd outside murmuring to each other in shock. I squeezed past to find out what was happening and froze. There lay Felix, the clown whom I had so often laughed at. His body had been hit by a car in front of Zum Alten Fritz. The paint on his face still remained, this dreadful smile, and now his cheeks were pale, smeared with blood. The next morning, I never believed what I was actually seeing. Now, I was not going to see him anymore. The burning memory of that lifeless body lit in my brain. My parents tried consoling me, but I couldn't give up my feeling of not being fine. I didn't sleep that night. I closed my eyes each time, but each time was Felix's face. It must have been well after midnight when I heard a noise that made my heart seize. It was the sound of a flute playing that same unsettling melody Felix always played. I shot up in bed. It sounded as if it came from outside my window. I shivered and got up and drew the curtains open. The street below was empty, but the music went on. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, but deep down inside me, I knew better. Felix was gone, but his presence hadn't left me. The whole day passed with me under the impression that someone was watching me. I was in the evening at zum Altan Fritz with my family, and it was impossible for me to enjoy my meal because I kept glancing toward the corner where Felix used to stand. But of course, it was empty. The flute music came again that night, louder and piercing this time. It got into my room, swirling all around me. I pulled the bed covers over my head to keep it out, but the tune seeped into my brain. Then I heard something else. Elizabeth. Slowly, I peeked over the edge of my blanket, and my blood ran cold. There, standing in the corner of my bedroom, was Felix. His once cheerful clown costume was now dirty and torn, and his painted smile was smeared across his pale face. But his eyes, they were hollow, lifeless, and locked onto me. He placed the flute in his mouth and began playing that same tune. I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed with fear as Felix started slowly moving towards me. The more steps he made, the more wider his painted smile grew. The room became even colder and the music of the flute filled my ears until it was all I could hear. He stopped at the foot of my bed and looked down at me with those dead eyes. This time he spoke barely above a whisper, but I heard every word. "Izzy, I've missed you." Tears overflowed my eyes, but I could still not move. He stretched out a freezing cold hand and touched my arm. A jolt of freezing pain shot through my body, and then everything went black. On waking the next morning, the sun streamed through my window and Felix was gone. But the long, cool hand of the negative persisted, leaving only echoes of that flute melody haunting in his wake, reminding me he was not really gone. Not yet. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.